With Israel officially launching its operation to take over Gaza, the Israeli-Palestinian strife seems to have passed the point of no return. After more than 75 years of creeping expansion and deals that weren't meant to be kept, can the conflict be settled by brutal yet totally unpretentious force? Well, to discuss that, I'm now joined by Akiva Eldar, an Israeli author and political analyst. Mr. Eldar, it's great to talk to you. Thank you very much for being available.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you've long been critical of the Netanyahu government for the way they've handled the Gaza crisis. What do you think is likely to come out of this offensive?
Well, what Netanyahu expects to come out is complete, total victory. He really believes that there is a possibility that the Hamas will surrender. But unfortunately, I believe that this is not his major interest. His major interest is to keep the war, to perpetuate it, and to make sure that his trial will never end, and that he will be able to postpone the elections that are scheduled for next year, for 2026. And in case of emergency, if you declare emergency, he may try to put the elections on hold and change the law, what actually to complete not only the total victory on Hamas, but the total victory on the Israeli democracy and the judicial.
Now, at least for the time being, the Israeli leadership indicates that the offensive may take several months. That's what they are talking about. And it is aimed at, quote, defeating the enemy and evacuating the population. And they also, at the time being, are making no reference to the hostages that are still being held in Hamas's captivity. Do you think there is any intention to either let the Palestinians back in after this quote-unquote evacuation, or indeed facilitate the release of the hostages?
Well, if you follow the statements that are coming out from senior ministers, like Minister of Finance, and actually is also a minister in the Ministry of Defense, Bezalel Smotrich, he sees this war as a kind of a real estate opportunity to, like actually the President of the United States said, to turn Gaza into a Mediterranean Riviera. And as far as I know, and I followed the news very closely, Netanyahu didn't try to correct Mr. Smotrich and to say, no, we have no intention to settle there, to reoccupy Gaza by a military governor and civil administration.
Now, this offensive on Gaza began right after the visit to Israel by the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who, as it has been speculated, may have delivered sort of tacit approval from the Trump administration to get the Gaza problem over and done with quickly. I wonder if you think such a swift, forceful resolution is likely to what has started to look like the Gaza quagmire to some observers.
Well, I think that nobody can deny that Israel is committing war crimes in Gaza, killing close to 100,000 people. 20,000 of them are children, women, starvation, if not famine. And it seems that the international community, as it was actually indifferent to the Israeli occupation that has been taking place now for almost 60 years. 72% of the Israelis were born into this reality of occupation. And look, the international community paid a lot of lip service. There were many UN resolutions calling Israel to start real peace negotiations, to find a diplomatic solution and to stop the violence. And Oksana, while we are talking, there are Israeli settlers driving Palestinian farmers and shepherds away from their homes in the West Bank.
Well, Mr. Eldar, you mentioned some of the actions that Israel has been taking over the decades, but recently it added yet another tool to its toolbox. I'm talking about the strikes on Qatar, which happened right when the negotiating team from Hamas was there, supposedly negotiating President Trump's peace proposal, which obviously made the situation in the region look more precarious yet again, with the Saudis pledging to provide their support to Doha. I wonder, though, why do you think the Israeli leadership felt the need to aggravate and escalate tensions with cooperative Arab neighbors? What are they getting from it?
First of all, I can say that the price tag that the Arab countries are putting on this reality that you just described perfectly, the price tag is not high enough. Listen, we have Egyptian and Jordanian ambassadors in Jerusalem. The Abraham Accords with the Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco are still intact. And it seems that the Israeli people are not really feeling the price of this situation. You go to the cafes and the restaurants, and even if you watch the news, they're busy with telling us how miserable we are because there are some countries who are not willing to participate in the Eurovision if Israel will be invited there. So, and the other thing is that actually the Hamas has been always the ally of the Israeli settlers, because their main problem or their target is to undermine any movement towards a two-state solution, to undermine any kind of diplomatic discussion. Look at the Israeli hysteria over the preparation of the UN to accept the two-state solution. Listen, we have accepted it, including Netanyahu, shook hands with Arafat. And now if you talk in Israel about a two-state solution, you find yourself in the, in a good day, a naive, in a bad day, a traitor.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned the United Nations, and in the aftermath of those strikes on Doha, the leaders of the Arab countries gathered to denounce this action, and they also suggested suspending Israel's membership in the United Nations, as if the Israeli leadership cares about that in any way. Now, I wonder, though, if that reflects how unhinged and totally abandoned this conflict has become, that the only response of the affected nation, the nation that has been bombed by Israel, is to call on to the ineffectual and, some would argue, totally irrelevant United Nations.
Yeah, I think that you can call it the Holocaust syndrome, especially Germany. They know that if you criticize Israel, you may be criticized for anti-Semitism. And the thing is that people who try to send a clear message to Israel that it's not business as usual after what we have been doing to Gaza, you will be blamed for ignoring the horrible October 23. In the minds of the Israelis, and this is the kind of the paradox. On one hand, Israel is bragging about being the strongest army in the Middle East, one of the strongest army and high-tech superpower in the world. But at the same time, we refuse to give up the position of victims. The Jewish people, like one minister said, that we left the ghetto in Europe, but the ghetto refuses to leave us. So it's a kind of a ghetto mentality. Actually, I wrote an article in March 24 calling to boycott the Israeli athletes from the Olympic Games. And I said, there are double standards, and the double standards go both ways. One way, that Russia was not able to participate in the games, and since it occupied the Ukraine, and Israel is exempted from this. But on the other hand, there are other countries who misbehave, and Israel will always remind you what the Arabs did in Syria to themselves, what happened after the Arab Spring in Libya, in Tunisia. And the Israelis believe that we are not getting a fair deal with the international community.
Now, can I ask you something? You mentioned the conflict in Ukraine, and I would claim that there are many differences between what's going on in Gaza and what's going on in Ukraine, including the proportionality of the use of force and the number of civilian casualties. But I think the main thing as far as the international community is concerned, there are at least efforts or at least a pretense that there should be some sort of diplomacy. I mean, President Trump wanted to get involved to negotiate between the Ukrainians and the Russians, and the Europeans paying lip service to, some diplomatic arrangements. But when it comes to Israel and the situation in Gaza, there's none of that. The possibility of a diplomatic outcome is not even mentioned. In fact, once it was tried in Doha with the Hamas negotiators, Israel directly struck the negotiating team. How do you explain that? The fact that the international community, not Netanyahu, who's been a very shrewd politician for many years, but the international community doesn't even have the slightest notion that it needs to get involved and start discussing diplomatic means to settling this conflict?
Well, there was an attempt by many American presidents to get involved and to pursue diplomatic negotiations with Israel.
But the deals that Israel signed on to were never kept really in good faith.
What can we do? Israel is a democracy. The majority of the Israelis disagree with me, and the small camp that I represent in my views and my articles. And we have another real problem that looking at the future, Israel will either stop being a Jewish state or a democratic state. And this is because of demography. I have 3 children, 5 grandchildren. My friends have sometimes even less than that, while our ultra-Orthodox neighbors and the settlers, they have 10 to 12 children and 30 grandchildren. So the demography shows that actually what we are witnessing now, Oksana, is paradise compared to what will happen here 20 years from now. And actually, I call the international community to save Israel from itself, and not to allow Israel to have it both ways. We cannot, nobody can eat the cake and have it, even Netanyahu. And it seems that the international community starts moving because the price of stalemate and no peace process is still lower than the price of making concessions. And the concessions are going to be painful. It's giving back territories, and people don't like doing it. Look at the Ukraine.
Mr. Eldar, as we've been discussing before the break, the situation within Israel is changing dramatically, and you suggested that it needs to be saved from itself. And I think there is one, despite all the military might and military whims that Netanyahu government may employ, there is one major objective challenge, and that is the sheer number of Palestinians that they have to deal with. How do you think the Israeli leadership is likely to go about that little big problem?
Let's hope that the recent public polls are really representing a trend in the Israeli discourse and in the public opinion. According to those polls, if there were elections today, Netanyahu would lose in big number. But what you're going to get in return is former future Prime Minister Naftali Bennett with a coalition that I'm not sure will be actually voluntarily offering a deal of territories for peace. We need at least three to tango. There is on the table the Saudi offer, the Arab Peace Initiative, that was not even discussed in the government. And in democracy, the leaders must listen to the voice of the people. And it seems that they are cut off from the Israeli street, from the voice of the people who are leaving Israel. You know, we are going to celebrate the new year, and the Central Bureau of Statistics has just released the annual figures. And they say that this year, 70,000 Israelis left the country. And they are the cream de la cream. These are the high-tech professionals, doctors, and we will be left alone in the Middle East, and will fit with Syria and Arab countries that don't really care about human rights, civil rights, and democracy.
Well, I mean, at this point of time, at least for me, it's hard to hear about, Israeli respect for human rights and democracy, given, the tactics that it's employing. But I do want to ask you about the people on the street, as you said, because the Netanyahu government is open about its intention to build the so-called Greater Israel, and it has already attacked a number of neighboring countries. It has taken hold of some of the new territories, not only in the West Bank and Gaza, but also in Syria and in Lebanon and other countries. I wonder if the Israeli public is reacting the way it does to the actions of its government because the people are tacitly supporting this expansionist idea for a greater Israel.
Well, if you look at the figures, actually the Israelis are voting with their feet, with their legs against the settlements. I wrote a book about the settlers. I call them the lords of the land. But look, there are 500,000 Israeli settlers. 1/3 of them are Orthodox that moved there not for any ideological motivation. And if you offer them housing in Israel proper, they will be happy to move back. So demographically and politically, this is a failure. In almost 60 years, only out of 10 million Israelis, only 500,000, or to be more correct, it's maybe 300,000 people moved there. There are not even 5% of the Israeli population, and they are far from being a majority in the occupied territories. So I believe that once the Israeli public will have to decide whether they really want to become what Netanyahu suggested, Sparta, or to adopt the Masada syndrome, and they want to commit suicide. And the other option will be a regional peace, to accept the Arab Peace Initiative. And the Israelis, they like the carrots, but maybe, like children, they have to also experience once in a while a stick or two.
But Mr. Eldar, who is going to deliver that stick? Because for the time being, again, as we have discussed, the international community is rather numb. And the only major power that used to have any influence on Israel, the United States, I mean, is more or less giving it a green light.
Well, it has to come top down and bottom up at the same time, simultaneously. It has to come from the Israeli people. And it seems that they start feeling that the linkage between the embargo on Israel. There are more and more companies in the world that refuse to do business with their Israeli counterparts. The Israeli tourists don't feel comfortable admitting that they come or to speak Hebrew in the streets. And after, as I said, if Israel will be boycotted from the Eurovision and maybe from the World Cup, this is the ultimate punishment. If the World Cup will not be transmitted, aired to Israel, maybe this is one too much. And at the same time, like President Macron is doing right now with other European leaders and with our Arab leaders that signed the Abraham Accords, once they will tell the Israeli people, no more having the cake and eating the cake and having it.
Mm-hmm. Now, we know historically that perceptions of or notions of normality do change in life-threatening circumstances. And the Israeli society has been on edge for a number of decades right now. I mean, one could argue that it is the Israeli government that is creating this type of stress and anxiety within its own population to serve its political ends. But still, you know, the population is affected. And I do want to ask you, what do you think the people of Israel, the majority of them, want at this point? How do they understand the notion of peace? And is it understood in a way that, you know, people in other countries think about it?
You know, sometimes I feel closer to my Palestinian friends than to the Israeli right-wing settlers who believe that God has promised the Jewish people the land and all the land. I don't have any communication with these people. And unfortunately, as I said before, they are having the upper hand demographically, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And if you look at the Israeli government, it's a bunch of criminals. There are at least half dozen of them that have been indicted, led by the Prime Minister of Israel, who is suspected of corruption. And I didn't believe that it is possible to report about Netanyahu's trial and what he was telling the judges, and at the same day, few hours later, to report about his meeting with the President of the United States. Listen, there is nothing that represents this crazy reality more than what happened yesterday. He asked the judges to leave the court earlier because he had to welcome the president of Fiji. This is a new embassy in Jerusalem, while Israel is in a deep crisis with leading European countries and with the Jewish community around the world. Okay, we have to be satisfied with Fiji. Mm-hmm. And it's a tragic comic.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not sure it's comic. I do agree with you that it's tragic. And you mentioned the word crazy. I think anyone who's studied Israeli history deeply, I mean, Israel is a political project. I think it's impossible not to conclude that this state is based on the capitalization of collective trauma. You know, it uses the victimhood mentality to claim more benefits for itself without recognizing any of the constraints or any of the limits. And this sense of religious or political superiority is on full display now. But we know again, historically, that this kind of collective trauma is a long-lasting phenomenon, and its consequences may be dire because it often leads to the reversal of roles. You know, former victims become very active aggressors and vice versa. And I think the worst thing of all is that it leads to the accumulation of sort of unconscious hatred or psychosis within the society itself. Do you see that as a risk that the Israelis may sooner or later turn against themselves rather than channeling, as they do now, their hatred onto the neighbors, be it the Palestinians or the Iranians?
Well, this is I think, part of the explanation. The other part is that there are Palestinians who are playing into the hands of those zealots. You know, the Israeli government, headed by Ariel Sharon, who was the hero of the settlers, he has disengaged from Gaza. I believe that this was a mistake, that he did it unilaterally and not part of the Oslo Agreement. But in the view of many Israelis, including those who didn't vote for Netanyahu, hey, we gave them this, how they see this. We gave them Gaza. We left Gaza in 2005. And what we got in return is the massacre in October 2023. I just heard a son of, and this is a very moving story, a son of one of the heroes, the member of Women's for Peace, and that was driving Palestinian children to hospital. She lived in a kibbutz near Gaza, and she was tortured by people, maybe that he took their children to hospital. And this is the other part of the story. And well, Israel did everything to undermine Arafat and Abu Mazen. And as I said, Hamas is the best partner of the zealots. But the Palestinians, in their elections in 2004, they have decided to crown the Hamas. And the Hamas is not hiding, you know, their dream to eliminate Israel.
Well, Mr. Eldar, on this rather unsettling point, we have to leave it. Thank you very much for being with us and sharing your insights.
Thank you.